Hello, and thanks for tuning into this video. My name is Zach, and I'm a lifelong reader and lover of all things science fiction, fantasy, comics, manga, personal development, business, and everything in between. Today, I'm sharing my thoughts and quick review of Mel Robbins' new book, The Let Them Theory. Now, this book had been on my radar for a while because I've become a semi-fan, I guess you could say, of Mel Robbins. I do subscribe to her YouTube channel, and I've read the 5 second rule, and I know of her philosophies of her other books. And of course, being a follower of the YouTube channel and occasionally tuning into a lot of the episodes because I think she has great guests all the time on the channel. And it's really interesting to hear her kind of like synthesize these guests' complex ideas into kind of layman's terms. And that's what this book is. So that's this big spoiler is that's kind of what or maybe that's Mel Robbins' whole brand is boiling down like these concepts into actionable insights. And that's what the Let Them Theory is. And to give a little more context of what the Let Them Theory is, in the early chapters of the book, she even admits that this theory of the Let Them Theory is basically a synthesis of ideas that have been around for ages. And she names Stoicism, Buddhism, attachment theory. And just by the name, you can kind of even imagine what it is. It's let them, it's the serenity prayer that let others do to them sort of thing. And that's all it is. And you think, okay, how can you write a book about that? It's because she does go into a lot of the science. So there's pros and cons to this book. And I think everybody gets something out of anything they read. I mean, even if you maybe don't agree with the author, maybe the book changed your thinking, right? Or at least it got you thinking a certain way, even if it's in disagreement. And not saying I don't agree with her theory in this book, the Let Them Theory. So it's not really a philosophical book; it's more of a self-help book. But I agree with the premise of the book because I'm a follower of so many other kind of self-help, personal development like gurus, teachers in this genre, which encompasses everything from Stoicism, Buddhism, meditation, mindfulness. It all kind of comes together. And in this book, the Let Them Theory, it's Mel giving her personal brand and her perspective of how that applies to basically herself, but also her audience. So that was one of my big takeaways was how this book is definitely for fans of Mel Robbins, right? Like if you know who she is, you're going to like this book. If you like Mel Robbins, you're going to like this book because she narrates it herself. I listen to audiobooks, so listening to the audiobook is like listening to a very extended episode of the Mel Robbins podcast. And again, if you've listened to or watched the Mel Robbins podcast, these ideas, it's not brand new information either. It's because it's based on Stoicism and Buddhism, and it's things that have been around for ages that have helped humanity in these various ways, in various different formats. And this is Mel putting her spin on it. So what I really liked about the book was that it's so kind of a modern reinterpretation of Stoicism, Buddhism, and attachment theory. And that's Mel Robbins' brand, right? So if you know her other kind of big books, which is the 5 second rule. So if you ever heard of the 3 second rule of like when you drop something on the floor, the 3 second rule to pick it up, it's sort of like that. I mean, again, it's a concept for motivation that I can boil down into 2 seconds. It's her philosophy is, or her idea, big idea is 5 seconds, count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then boom, take action. So she encompasses this kind of like self-motivation of don't like get in your head and listen to the excuses. And she uses the kind of phrase of the 5 second rule of this countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 as the trigger to inspire you to just take action without overthinking it. So it's I guess a mnemonic kind of phrase and a way to, hard to say philosophy, but a way to think about things and keep it in the back of your head. Like, okay, 5 seconds. I'm debating my two things. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just do it. I can't pick out what to wear. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's the first thing that comes to mind? That's what I'm going to wear. So it's boiling these concepts of like decision and bias to action into a 5 second rule. And then the high five rule is kind of similar. It's high five as in like high fiving yourself. So it's working up your own like confidence by voting for yourself and giving yourself a high five. So again, it's maybe more than a book needed to be. That's kind of how I felt like the 5 second rule, that it's a great idea. And okay, honestly, it's maybe a good TED talk, but is it really a long book? And that's kind of what I thought about going into the Lethem theory. And I knew her brand, right? I know that this is going to be like a distillation of ancient wisdom, Stoicism, Buddhism, but packaged in a way that's easy to understand and easy to remember and take away from this book. So, if nothing else, I really have to give her props for, again, condensing these ideas in just a simple let them and then let me. So, it's kind of a growth or evolution of her previous theories, or not theories, but ideas and concepts of how to live a better life, that you just let people do whatever they're going to do, and then you're going to let myself react to it however we will, which is, again, like the core tenet of mindfulness and stoicism, that I'm only in control of my own thoughts. I have no control of others. So I'm just going to let them do whatever they're going to do, and I'm just going to focus on what things that I can control. And by packaging it in that great kind of reminder, it allows anybody to just return to that and get in that state of that Stoic philosophy. And again, why I think this is it could be a valuable book for you if you're looking for that, is that it's like another book I recently read from Chase Jarvis, who wrote a book, and again, similar philosophy of the best camera is the one that's with you. So he's a photographer. If you've never heard Chase Jarvis, a really cool guy. I do enjoy his books and his thinking on creativity, but it boils down to the best camera is the one you have. So if you have this $10,000, top of the line camera that you put all this money for, if you don't use it, then what's the point, right? So it's better to use his philosophy in the book, or not philosophy. The idea was just using your iPhone is good enough, because it's better to take any photo than no photo. How can you be a photographer if you don't take pictures or create art? So doing the small thing is better than kind of getting your head and only using their $10,000 camera. And that's exactly like the Lethem theory, and why I think it is valuable, because you have these Stoic concepts and Buddhist tenets of how to not be affected by the outside world. But if you don't use them and actually implement them in your life, then yeah, it's good to know that, but you're not actually kind of walking the talk, right? You're just talking the talk, not walking the talk. So you have to actually implement these core tenets of philosophy into your life. And Mel Robbins does that. So she grounds all these philosophies and the reasonings why this works kind of with scientific studies. And she gives examples within her life and her perspective of how she's applied these tenets to her life. So, her herself being kind of an influencer, you kind of can probably resonate with some of the stories and kind of her brand and the way she tells things with kind of a funny, self-deprecating style, where it's like, oh, this bad thing happened to me, but haha, here's what I learned from it. So it's totally on brand for Mel Robbins. And it is a really great way to distill a philosophy down to that. I keep coming to that because I think it makes it a really good book, and it's worth reading. That said, that's what I liked about the book. What I didn't like, or maybe not, don't want to say didn't like, but what didn't resonate with me was that to that other side of the coin, some of these examples are Mel Robbins examples. So her target audience is very much kind of, to be stereotypical, kind of similar to herself, right? That it's middle-aged white women in the Western world. So she talks about kind of very upper middle class white woman problems. Like one of the early stories is where she's giving an example of how she felt so bad because her friends went on like a trip to Mexico without her. This is very much a kind of a first world problem, but at the same time, you can kind of understand where she was coming from. And we've all been excluded out of a group for whatever reason, probably at some point in our lives. Maybe not the other housewives that went on their Mexican, international trip without spring break without her, and she feels sad and left out. And that's what inspired her to just let them, and they had their own lives, and she goes into why, they just had their own thing, and it's nothing wrong with that. And it's, of course, it's very true that you're getting your own head of thinking about, oh, they must be mad at me or this and that, when the reality is usually just something very silly, or as Mel said, that she didn't put in the work in these friendships. And she talks about these examples of putting in the work. So it's all actually really good advice, but sometimes, of course, packaged in the Mel Robbins lens. And some of the examples might initially scoff at, or when she's talking about, again, her husband or her kids or menopause. I mean, yes, even as a male, I'm going to not completely resonate, but she does tell the story in a way that I can kind of extract the insight that she's trying to give, like the example of the Mexican cruise example or Mexican holiday example. It's everyone's had a similar friend group kind of thing. And even if you don't have the specific family dynamic that she has, you can probably, relate that to either a friend, a coworker, or your own family, of where some kind of other interaction that her example applies to you. So it is relative or relevant to you. It could be, but you just have to kind of extract those insights, which may not, come off the wrong way. Like for me, sometimes they're a little cheesy. Like one of the later chapters about dating. I mean, it's okay. I can understand why it's helpful to put that in a book. I'm sure it's going to hit somebody that, oh yeah, that's a great example of dating. And even in the book, the dating example is she's kind of telling the story through her daughter, because she's married as well. She's not dating, but she's kind of using her daughter as an example of going through heartbreak and a breakup and how she would coach someone. And that's exactly what you can take away from this, that even if you're not the one going through the breakup, she kind of frames it as if you were the one, but you could also frame it as coaching someone else through maybe not a breakup, but any kind of hard time. So yeah, the examples and the kind of the target audience was the one thing that kind of pulled it down a little bit for me, that some of the sections were not really relevant, like the dating stuff later. But again, maybe it'll be useful. It's a tool to have in my back pocket if I'm ever coaching someone else of how to deal with breakups or, going through tough times. So maybe I'm calling that out as a negative now, but maybe it'll be a positive later. Who knows? But all in all, it was, like I said, it was a fun book. If you like Mel Robbins, her style, I like her enough to, again, check out her podcast when the guest that is on is someone that I think would be cool to hear from. I don't watch it religiously every day, but I probably watch it more than I like to admit, because some of the guests are kind of very interesting. The negatives being that this is a very Mel Robbins, so if you don't resonate with her, you're probably not going to resonate with the book and the way she tells it, even if she's kind of distilling these ancient truths and these common, ways of bettering your life. Like, let people do what they want and be in control of your own feelings and your own thoughts of how you react to what other people do. So really good advice that we all need to take to heart, and having that let them theory as a tool in your toolbox, your personal life toolbox of a way to look at the world and kind of not let things overwhelm you. I think it is worth checking out. It's at least worth listening to her podcast a few times, because obviously with the book launch, she's been promoting this on her own show and a bunch of other shows that, again, through the magic of the YouTube algorithm, that I see all the recommendations of, here's Mel Robbins on this podcast, here's Mel Robbins as a guest on that podcast. So you can check out the podcasts that either she's hosted herself or as a guest to kind of get a sense of the flavor and the philosophy of the book. So she's on that promotional tour. So if you think it's worth listening to, worth exploring, the book does, kind of delve deep with evidence-based, science-backed studies that she tries to weave into why these core tenets and ideas have some kind of scientific merit. Even if you don't kind of subscribe that this is something that has been around forever, even if it's maybe not scientifically, in the past, Stoicism was just Stoicism, but now there's kind of studies that kind of, enforce some of the ideas that are presented in Stoicism. But all in all, I thought it was great. So I think you should check it out. I would give it a 4 out of 5. Again, I think it's a very solid book. It's something that I spent the Audible credit on. I think it was a worthwhile credit, and it was a good listen. It was an super extended Mel Robbins podcast episode. So do check it out. That was The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins, and have a great day.